It's okay. Femi Inu on station.
Far enough, Pablo.
Come. It's me.
Tree line.
Do कुछ लूनासिटी आ गई।
दिमाग धड़कन थामे रखना, अंडे की धुन खुद सुनोगी।
इन्हें तुम दोनों ले लो, तू है तो सही। सुना, किसकी धुन सुनाई दे रही है?
One lived near the salt lakes anymore. There were ruins, yes, crumbling stone cottages half sunken into the cracked earth, a church with a bell that hadn't rung in decades, and a watchtower that leaned so far east it looked like it was whispering to the wind. The people had gone long ago, driven out not by war nor famine but by sound. A sound that came from the lake after sundown. It began as a hum, soft, almost gentle, like a lullaby hummed by something older than time. But by nightfall it deepened into a breath long and uneven, not quite wind, not quite voice, a sound that seemed to crawl along the ground and slip into the cracks between your thoughts. Those who lived closest said it felt like something was waking up. Every generation had stories of animals that dropped dead by the shore, of children who wandered too close and were found days later with empty eyes and no memory, of men who followed the sound and simply disappeared. but those were only stories until Mira's brother vanished. His name was Elian. He was 17 and quiet and kind. He played the flute and sang to the sick, and whenever the wind carried that strange hum from the salt lake, he would sit outside with a faraway look as though he could understand it. One night, when the moon was thin as a blade, Elian walked out of the village, and he never came back. They found his flute a mile from the lake, still warm, no footprints, no signs of struggle, only silence, heavy, dreadful, unnatural. Mira was 13 when it happened. She had always looked up to Elian like he was made of stars. After he disappeared, she stopped speaking for 2 weeks. On the 15th day, she went to the edge of the lake and sat for hours listening. That night, she heard the breath for the first time, and she understood what her brother had felt. Not peace, not music, but calling, a beckoning that twisted around the soul and whispered, "Come closer, I remember you." Years passed. The sound returned every season, stronger and closer. The village grew smaller. The elders said the lake was cursed or haunted by an ancient god. Some blamed spirits, others believed it was a wound in the world, a place where something had tried to rise and failed, now left to sleep under its own sorrow. But Mira wanted truth. On the 7th anniversary of Elian's disappearance, Mira packed nothing but her brother's flute, a length of rope, and a lantern with black oil. She left in silence at dusk, just as the wind began to hum. She walked alone. No one followed, no one dared. As she approached the salt lake, the world changed. The ground shimmered white under her feet, glittering with sharp crystals. The air thickened. The hum became a low vibration that shook her teeth. Every breath tasted of copper and rain. The sky looked bruised. Time slowed. At the center of the lake was a stone, black, flat, and dry, though the salt water never stopped circling it. The villagers called it the mouth, but no one had ever dared step on it. Mira did. The moment her foot touched the stone, the humming stopped. A silence deeper than silence fell, the kind of quiet that drowns sound and thought alike. Her lantern flickered. Then, from beneath the lake, something stirred. The water didn't move, but something moved inside it. It rose like smoke, like steam, like memory, a shape not made of matter but of grief, coiling up and around, tall as a tree, wide as the wind. No face, no arms, only a presence, and then it breathed. Mira fell to her knees, not in fear, but because the sound was too heavy, like it pressed on every part of her soul at once. The shape spoke, not in words, but in intention. "You have returned what was taken." Mira held up the flute. "I came to take him back." The shape leaned in. "He is not yours now. He chose. He sings for the deep." Tears welled in Mira's eyes, but she didn't look away. "Then take me instead. Let him go." The silence turned hot. "Would you silence the lake?" "Yes." The presence paused. Then, without warning, the stone beneath her split. Darkness bloomed. She fell, not down, but inward, through memory and breath and dream. She saw her brother suspended in a sea of silence, eyes closed, mouth open, music spilling from him like light. His soul kept the thing sleeping. He opened his eyes. "Mira," she smiled. "It's my turn now." She took his place. Elian awoke alone on the stone. The lake was calm. The wind was quiet. The hum was gone. He walked back to the village, barefoot, broken, alive. He told no one what happened, but every year, on that same night, the wind stops humming, and if you listen very, very closely at the edge of the salt lake, you can hear a single, soft breath in the dark, a girl's breath, still keeping the silence, still singing for the deep. In the far reaches of the world, where the land forgets the sky and the sea forgets the shore, there was a forest no map dared name. It was called Valdara by those who feared it, not for its beasts nor its storms, but for the thing that breathed beneath its soil. The breath was not constant. It came only in the dark hours between midnight and dawn, a deep, slow, trembling sound that echoed without echo, a breath that was too large for lungs, too ancient for words. The villagers who lived far beyond the forest's edge called it the morning sleep. No one entered Valdara after sunset. No one spoke the name of the thing that lived beneath the trees, but some said it had once been a god, or a man who tried to become one. Others said it was the memory of the earth itself, weeping in its dreams. All agreed on one thing: when the breath stops, something wakes. Arden was only 10 when his older sister Leora vanished in the forest. She had gone with the hunters at first light. The others returned by dusk, pale and quiet, eyes refusing to meet his. They found no blood. No tracks, only her pendant, a small silver sun, buried in the black moss near a twisted hollow tree. That night the breath came louder than ever before, not just below the ground, but inside the walls, inside the hearts of those who listened. The sound pressed into their chests like grief that had grown teeth. Arden's mother stopped singing. His father stopped speaking. But Arden remembered. Every night, every breath. Years passed, and no one else entered Valdara, but Arden watched the trees from afar. And on the 7th year after Leora vanished, the breath changed. It became slower, weaker, like something inside was running out of air or patience. Then the dreams began. He would wake in the middle of the night with dirt under his nails, mud on his feet, his window open, and in his ears a voice, not calling, but waiting. One morning he found Leora's pendant at the foot of his bed, still warm. That night, without telling anyone, Arden lit a torch and walked into Valdara. The forest did not fight him. The trees parted like doors. The air thickened, yes, with ash, with salt, with breath, but no branches scratched him, no roots rose to trip him. It was as if the forest was watching, expecting. Hours passed in silence. The thing that breathes in silence. They didn't talk about the cliffs after dark. The villagers of Ceylon Hollow lived quiet, superstitious lives on the edge of a jagged coast, where the sea met a wall of ancient rock. They farmed salt. They told stories. And when the sun dipped behind the hills, they barred their windows, turned in their lanterns, and spoke in whispers. For it was then that the breathing would begin. No one remembered when it started, the long ragged sighs that rose from the sea caves beneath the cliffs. The elders said it was the tide, though they never went near. Children dared each other to listen closer, but those who did never smiled quite the same afterward. It was not the wind, it was not the sea, it was not natural, it was alive. In every generation someone vanished. Evan was 17 when his younger brother Milo disappeared. They'd been climbing rocks near the southern cove, where the cliffs leaned like giant sleeping beasts. Milo had run ahead, chasing a fox, laughing with wind in his hair. Dusk 9. Then came the stillness, not a sound, not a cry, not even a splash. Evan searched until his hands bled and his voice cracked, screaming into caves where even his echoes didn't return. Only the breathing answered him, slow, guttural, and close, as if the cliff itself had drawn in a breath and was waiting. Waiting to exhale. Milo was never found. No body, no bones, only his small blue scarf, folded neatly on a rock that had never been dry. 3 years later, Evan was no longer a boy. He'd grown quiet, distant. He worked the salt flats in silence and walked alone at dusk. Every night he dreamed of the caves, of Milo's voice echoing from deep below, of something massive stirring beneath the island. He began to notice things others didn't. That birds never flew near the cliff's edge. That fish avoided the waters closest to the rocks. That the ground there was warmer than it should be, even in winter, and that the breathing had changed. It was louder now, slower, like something was growing stronger. One night when the wind died and the sea stilled like glass, Evan lit a lantern and walked toward the cliffs. No one tried to stop him. They had seen that look in others before, the ones who never returned. He climbed the path alone, heart pounding with every step. The sky stretched above him like torn velvet, starlight swallowed by clouds. The cave mouth waited, wide and black and still. As he entered, the breath hit him, thick, wet, trembling. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. It curled around his bones and reached into his chest like a second heartbeat. The air smelled of salt, smoke, and something old, not decay, but memory. Memory burned into stone. He walked deeper. The cave sloped down and down until even the light of his lantern began to flicker. The breath came in slow pulses, drawing him forward. He passed ancient symbols carved into the walls, worn by time and water, faces of beasts, eyes like stars, mouths open in eternal screams. Then he saw it, a figure suspended over a chasm, small, still, familiar, Milo. He hung in the air, wrapped in strands of mist and light, his eyes closed, his body untouched by age, as if frozen mid-laugh, as if the cave had stolen him in the exact moment he'd vanished and kept him dreaming, and beneath him, darkness, not emptiness, movement, the thing that breathed, not a beast, not a man, a presence, vast and buried, coiled and coiling. Its breath rolled up from the pit like thunder dragged across the sea floor. And in that breath, a voice, "He keeps me sleeping." Evan trembled. "He's just a child. His dream feeds my chains. His silence is my slumber." Evan stepped forward, tears stinging his eyes, then let him go. "Take me instead." The cave shook, the figure stirred. Milo's lips parted, his eyes fluttered. "You would silence the sea?" the breath asked. "I would quiet the world," Evan said, "if it meant he could live." The presence paused. Then it breathed in, so long, so deep it pulled at Evan's soul. Light shattered, the cave darkened, and then silence. Evan never returned, but at dawn the villagers found Milo on the cliffs, curled in the grass, eyes wide with wonder. He didn't remember the cave, he didn't remember the thing. But he remembered a hand holding his, and ever since that night the breathing never came again. The cliffs are silent now, but if you listen, the breath beneath the earth, there were places forgotten by time, places maps refused to name and stars seemed to avoid. One such place was Isle Tharos, a lonely patch of land adrift in the northern sea. Cold mists wrapped around it like mourning veils, and black cliffs rose like the backs of sleeping giants. The island had no ports, no songs, no stories, not anymore. Once it had been a thriving settlement. Lush meadows fed flocks of sheep, and the caves near the cliffs were a favorite haunt of children chasing echoes. The people of Tharos were proud, quiet folk who lived simply and worshipped the old gods who breathed life into land and sea. But one night, a night no one could date, yet everyone remembered, the breathing began. It was deep, slow, rhythmic, not the soft whisper of wind or the rush of tide, but something else, something alive, something vast, something buried. At first it was easy to dismiss, a strange echo perhaps, the shifting of underground rivers, but as weeks turned into months the sound grew louder, clearer. It echoed up from the caves like a sleeping giant exhaling beneath the island. And then the disappearances began. People vanished without a trace, no cries, no signs of struggle. Children, farmers, elders, always at night, always when the breath came strongest. The village was soon abandoned, except for a small family who stayed behind, the Darrows. Cale Darrow was just a boy when his sister Lyra disappeared. She was 16, he was 12. They had been inseparable. He remembered her last words clearly, "Don't follow. No matter what you hear." That night he woke to find her gone. He searched for hours, calling into the darkness. All he found was her ribbon, caught on the brambles near the cliff path. From that night on, Kyle changed. He spoke less, ate little, and every night he would sit by the cliff, listening to the breath. Years passed. The island rotted, trees withered, animals fled. Only Kyle remained, now 17, living alone in the family cottage. The air was thick with silence, broken only by that low, steady breathing that pulsed through the rock. Kyle began to study the island. He explored the caves with lanterns and chalk, marking passages and symbols. He uncovered ruins, remnants of a people who had once sealed something deep below. Ancient writings spoke of a being born of sorrow, buried by sacrifice, a curse that needed containment, a breath that should never wake. He came to a terrifying conclusion. Lyra had not been taken. She had given herself, and it wasn't enough. One bitter night, Kyle descended into the deepest cave, his heart beat in rhythm with the breath. The walls pulsed with heat and light. At the heart of the cavern he found it, a pit endless and black. Above it hovered a shape, Lyra, unchanged, suspended, her eyes closed, her arms outstretched, dreaming. Kale wept. "I'm here," he whispered. "Let her go. Take me instead." A voice rose with the breath, not sound, but presence. "She sleeps, and I slumber. You come willingly. That is power." Kale stepped forward. "You dream," the voice said. "You feel, you suffer, you feed me." He nodded. "So let her go." A long breath filled the cavern, and in the silence that followed, Lyra fell gently to the stone floor, and Kyle vanished, as though he had never been. Lyra awoke days later on the grass above the cliff, confused, alone. She remembered nothing but the warmth of arms holding her. She returned to the village, empty, forgotten, but the breathing was gone, and over time trees grew again, birds returned, wind carried laughter. Yet some nights, when the mist thickens and the moon hides, a faint, slow breath can be heard beneath the earth. Not of a god, but of a brother, still dreaming, still breathing, so the world may sleep. Kay wet, trembling. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. It curled around his bones and reached into his chest like a second heartbeat. The air smelled of salt, smoke, and something old, not decay, but memory. Memory burned into stone. He walked deeper. The cave sloped down and down until even the light of his lantern began to flicker. The breath came in slow pulses, drawing him forward. He passed ancient symbols carved into the walls, worn by time and water. Faces of beasts, eyes like stars, mouths open in eternal screams. Then he saw it, a figure suspended over a chasm, small, still, familiar, Milo. He hung in the air, wrapped in strands of mist and light, his eyes closed, his body untouched by age, as if frozen mid-laugh, as if the cave had stolen him in the exact moment he'd vanished and kept him dreaming, and beneath him, darkness, not emptiness, movement, the thing that breathed, not a beast, not a man, a presence, vast and buried, coiled and coiling. Its breath rolled up from the pit like thunder dragged across the seafloor, and in that breath a voice. He keeps me sleeping, Evan trembled. He's just a child. His dream feeds my chains. His silence is my slumber. Evan stepped forward, tears stinging his eyes. Then let him go, take me instead. The cave shook, the figure stirred. Milo's lips parted, his eyes fluttered. You would silence the sea? The breath asked. I would quiet the world, Evan said, if it meant he could live. The presence paused. Then it breathed in so long, so deep, it pulled at Evan's soul. Light shattered. The breath beneath the earth, a suspense horror novella, extended version, excerpt. There are places on this earth that do not belong to time, places that stand still even as centuries pass them by, places that watch, listen, and remember, long after the people who once walked them have been buried or forgotten. Isle Tharos was one of those places. It wasn't marked on modern maps. Satellites, despite their gaze from above, revealed nothing more than a craggy shape in the middle of a grey and endless sea. If you asked a cartographer about it, they'd say it was an outdated myth, a sailor's legend perhaps. But in dusty libraries, in the margins of old atlases, and in the fading diaries of those who once dared to cross the northern currents, its name still lingered. Tharos, just one word, enough to make a fisherman spit and mutter a prayer, enough to send a cold shiver down the spine of a dreaming child. Long ago, Tharos had been alive, not just geologically, but communally. It had stone houses with smoke curling from their chimneys, grassy knolls where goats grazed peacefully, and children who climbed the jagged rocks to shout at the gulls. The villagers worshipped no god with a face, no idol carved from gold or bone. They bowed only to the earth, the sea, and the deep breath beneath it all, the unseen, the unspoken. It was said the island had a a living, breathing center beneath its stone body, and it needed to stay asleep. The people of Tharos knew the cost of keeping it that way. Every few decades, one of them would vanish, a silent, chosen one, always in the night. No struggle, no trace, only the morning fog and the faint rhythmic vibration that made the soil feel like skin. They accepted it until one year the cycle broke and the breathing began to grow louder, continues in the next extended entry, The Breath Beneath the Earth, a suspense horror novella, extended version, Part 1. There are places in this world that do not belong to time. You will not find them on tourist brochures or inside satellite scans. You might not even notice them if you passed right by, hidden behind sea fog, thick forest, or the kind of silence that settles in the bones and makes even birds forget to sing. These are the forgotten places, the leftovers of something ancient, places that observe, that wait, that remember. Long after men have turned to dust, these places still breathe. Isle Tharos was one such place. It did not appear on modern nautical charts. Pilots didn't fly over it, boats didn't land there. Even the newest GPS systems, as precise and obsessive as they had become, showed only a vague blur when one tried to zoom in on the waters north of the Rainier Line, a shifting, unsettled place in the sea, always wrapped in mist, always slightly colder than it should be. Ask a cartographer, and he'd say it was a myth, a sailor's hallucination brought on by too much rum and too many lonely nights. Ask a scientist and they'd tell you there was nothing but current interference or a minor magnetic anomaly in that part of the world. But ask an old fisherman, a true one, the kind whose hands are webbed with salt scars and whose eyes know how to stare past waves into memory, and you'll get a different answer. You might hear the name spoken in a whisper, never more than once. Tharos. Just that, one word, the kind of word that clings to the tongue, that tastes like rust, that echoes even when it's not said aloud. To some, it was just a dead island. To others, those who still believed, it was a watching place, a wound in the world that never properly healed, a scar left by something that should have been buried deeper than man ever dug. Long ago, no one quite knew how long, the island had been alive in the simplest sense. It had a village, perhaps 30 or 40 stone homes that squatted low to the ground as though afraid to stand too tall, moss-covered roofs, smoke rising from chimneys in slow spirals, a stone well at the center of the settlement, narrow paths of dark gravel lined with totems of sea bone and blackwood. Crops struggled in the rocky soil, but they grew. Goats grazed along the slopes. The people spoke little and smiled even less. But they lived, and they worshipped, not gods with faces or names, not saints or prophets or winged beings from above. No, the people of Tharos knelt to what lay below. They bowed to the deep breath beneath the earth, a force without shape or name. A presence older than language, older than the sky, older than fear itself. They did not speak of it, they did not record its tales, but they knew it. It pulsed through the ground, sometimes faint, like the after-echo of thunder in the soles of their feet, sometimes strong, like a heartbeat buried beneath the stone, always there, always waiting, and so the islanders did what had to be done. Every few decades, always in the dark season, when the sun barely kissed the sky and the night stretched long and starless, one of them would vanish. There was no ritual, no announcement, no procession. One day they were there, the next gone. There were no footprints, no struggle, just a silence in the air and a faint warmth beneath the ground, like the land itself had swallowed them whole. The people accepted this. They understood it was a price, because if the island did not feed, it might wake, and that they feared more than anything. The Breath Beneath the Earth, a suspense horror novella, extended version, Part 2. The island had its rhythm, a terrible, quiet rhythm. 3 generations might pass between each disappearance, sometimes 4, but never more than that, always one, always in the deep night when the moon turned red behind cloud and the wind refused to blow. The villagers learned to read the signs, the subtle changes in the air pressure, the moment the goats stopped bleating all at once, the feel of the soil just before it happened, warmer than it should be, soft beneath the feet, as if something vast and sleeping had shifted far below. They never questioned it, not aloud, and yet, despite their grim obedience, they left no record of it. No stories were told, no warnings passed on. The children grew up knowing only what they felt in the air, the way animals sense a storm long before it breaks. The oldest among them, the silent ones who had lived through more than one offering, kept their memories behind closed lips and dead eyes, until the year it stopped. It began with the winter that should have brought the fog, but didn't. The days remained cold, but the mists never settled. The sky stayed disturbingly clear, with pale bleached stars glaring down in silence. The ocean, normally restless and roaring against Tharos's cliffs, grew still. Too still. That was the first sign. The second was the goats. They refused to graze. They stood in small, trembling clusters along the hills, ears twitching, eyes wide. One by one they began to vanish, not into the earth as the villagers expected, but off the cliffs, fleeing, panicked. Several were found at the bottom, dashed to pieces on the black rocks, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways, as though something had frightened them into jumping. Then came the sound, a breath, low, vast, and long. It came at night, not every night at first, but enough to unsettle the bones. A slow sucking inhale, as though the land itself were gasping in its sleep. Then silence. Then, hours later, an exhale. Trembling, wet, not wind, never wind. Breath. Some claimed it was in their dreams. Others said they felt it while awake, lying in bed, staring at the wooden beams above, their hands clenching the blankets, teeth clenched tight as the ground beneath them seemed to rise slightly as if lifting to meet something coming from below. The elders, those who had survived offerings past, began to meet in secret. They did not speak openly, but something in their eyes changed. Not panic exactly, but something close to it. They knew. Something had been disturbed. Something had noticed the change. No one had vanished in nearly 40 years. The island had not been fed. The breath had been patient, perhaps too patient. Now it was waking, and it was hungry. It was Era who first heard it clearly. not the shallow pulse beneath the ground, not the occasional wind-like whisper the others dismissed. She heard words, whispers, low and crawling, like seaweed across her thoughts. She was 17 that winter, the daughter of a fisherman who had vanished the season before the last disappearance. She had always been odd, some said, born under a full eclipse, never cried as a baby, always watching things no one else noticed. She told no one at first, not when she began waking up with sea salt crusting her lips, not when her fingernails started to blacken at the edges as though stained by ink that would not wash off, not even when she began to dream of a stairway descending forever, carved into the bones of the island itself. Only when the others began to hear it too did she speak. "It's not angry," she said once during one of the rare town gatherings. Her voice was soft but clear. "It's not just hungry." The villagers stared at her, unblinking. "It's lonely." The silence that followed was deeper than the ocean surrounding them. It was one thing to fear the island, another to think of it as a thing that could feel, that could want. And it was in that silence that the first true tremor hit, just past midnight, no storm, no wind. The ground beneath every home gave a slow, groaning lurch. Crockery fell from shelves. Stones tumbled from the dry stacked fences along the hills. Somewhere near the edge of the village, an old cottage, long abandoned, split in two, its roof caving in like something had reached up and cracked it from beneath. The earth breathed in and did not exhale. The breath beneath the earth, a suspense horror novella, extended version, part 5. 37 years later. The research vessel Alecto approached the coordinates with skepticism. There was no mention of an Isle Tharos on any current naval charts. The sea in this part of the north was supposed to be barren, too cold, too rough, too deep. But they had come all the same, lured by fragments, a faded entry in a sailor's journal, a carved stone relic that had surfaced in a Norwegian fishing net, and a woman's voice captured on a broken tape recorder, repeating the same word, Theros. Dr. Clara Vielle had dedicated her life to forgotten places. She believed history had shadows, and sometimes, if you looked carefully, the shadows looked back. When the mist parted that morning and the shape of the island emerged from the waves, jagged, black, and cruelly beautiful, Clara did not smile. She shivered, because it was exactly how it had been drawn centuries ago, untouched, unchanged, as if it had been waiting. The crew made landfall cautiously. There were no birds, no footprints, no welcome. But the village was there, still standing. In time it became just another mystery, filed away, quietly forgotten, except by a few, except by the ones who heard it. It began slowly. At first it was just a whisper, caught on sonar recordings in Arctic sublayers, dismissed as thermal expansion or tectonic stress. But the rhythm was unmistakable. Every 37 seconds it pulsed, a low, living beat. The breath. Ships that passed too close to the coordinates reported strange interference. Compasses failed. Crew members complained of vivid collective dreams. One captain claimed his entire crew fell silent for 3 days. Not one of them spoke, ate, or slept. When they awoke, they all drew the same spiral on the ship's walls. They had no memory of doing it. Marine biologists noted changes too. Whale migrations shifted, seal populations vanished. Creatures long thought extinct began appearing again in sonar pings, massive, slow-moving forms that never surfaced, always near the same patch of ocean, always moving in circles. The place that wasn't on maps had begun to draw attention. Tharos was no longer sleeping, it was calling. On a winter morning 10 years later, a second expedition arrived, funded privately under no nation's flag, a team of 6, armed with tech, sensors, drones, weapons. They came not to explore, but to contain. They believed they were prepared. They were wrong. Within 6 hours, 4 of them were gone. No blood, no struggle, one by one, simply erased, as if the island refused them, as if it had already decided they were not the ones it had been waiting for. The last 2 fled, but before leaving, one of them, a linguist named Arlen, wrote something in the sand before the tide swept it away. She is still breathing. Somewhere below the surface, beneath stone and time, the chamber remained, and Era was still there, not as she had been, not human anymore, but still Era, still aware, and she was not alone. Claravale's presence pulsed beside her, not a separate mind, but a harmony, a chord that echoed through the breath. Together they listened. They remembered. They waited because the earth had changed. The world above had forgotten the old ways, had stopped listening. But here, beneath the stone, memory still lived. Every echo that touched the deep ocean floor whispered to them. Every footfall, every sonar ping, every storm overhead carried sound into the stone, and they listened, not with ears, but with a vast, endless patience. The breath no longer needed offerings. It no longer needed sacrifice. It had voices now, and through them, the island would no longer be forgotten. The spiral had been drawn, the cycle had reset, but something was different now. It was not just remembering. It was learning. It was watching. It was becoming. And in the deepest dark beneath the earth, something that had once been asleep opened its eyes. There are places on this earth that do not belong to time, places untouched by wind or war, unmoved by the ticking of clocks, places that remember long after people have forgotten. Tharos was one of those places. It never appeared on digital maps. No satellite image could capture its edges. It was said that even compasses grew silent when ships neared the fog that wrapped it. The name appeared only in fragments, old sailors' logs, brittle maps with faded ink, the cryptic margin notes of mad explorers. Tharos. Just a single word, but it carried weight, enough to make a seasoned mariner flinch, enough to chill a dreaming child from sleep. Long ago, Tharos had been alive. A village stood on its jagged cliffs, quiet and wind-worn. Stone homes, blackened by salt and time, clung to the rocks like barnacles. Goats wandered the knolls, and children shouted into the crashing wind, their voices torn away by the sea. The people of Tharos worshipped no god with a name, no saint, no star. They worshipped only the earth, the sea, and the deep breath beneath it all, an unseen presence they never spoke of above a whisper. The stories were always the same. The island had a heart, they said, a living center. It breathed slowly, deeply, endlessly from beneath the stone, and as long as it slept, they were safe. But sleep, like all things, is not eternal. Every few decades, one of the villagers would vanish. No cries in the night, no doors broken, just absence. A child, a fisherman, a mother. Always taken gently, always accepted. The villagers understood. It was not punishment, it was balance, their offering to keep the breath slow, to keep the island dreaming. Then, one season, the rhythm changed. The ground beneath their feet began to pulse more often. The wind carried something sharp in its tone. The fog thickened, not just at the sea's edge, but inland, clinging to homes and skin and breath. One night, the breath grew louder. That was the year Era stopped dreaming. She was 16, the daughter of the last healer on the island. She had heard the stories, the chants, the silences. But now the breath was no longer a myth to her. She could feel it, in her spine, in the soft soil beneath her window. She could hear it when she pressed her ear to the stone floor at night, and it was changing. One morning, just before the sun rose, they came for her. 3 of the elders, cloaked and hooded, stood outside her door. No words were exchanged. Her mother kissed her forehead and pressed a small round stone into her palm. "Remember," she whispered, then turned away. Era followed. They passed through a village hollowed by silence, doors shut tight, eyes hidden behind curtains. Even the sea had quieted. At the far edge they reached the old chapel, long abandoned, its roof sunken, vines gripping its bones like desperate hands. Inside, where once there had been an altar, now yawned a spiral staircase cut into the stone. It descended into blackness, slick and pulsing faintly with that sickly bioluminescent light she had dreamed of for weeks. No one spoke. She stepped into the dark, and the breath welcomed her. The deeper she went, the less she felt like herself. Her thoughts thinned, drawn out like thread in water. The walls were not carved, not built. They were grown. She could feel them, like skin around her, warm, soft, and somehow alert. She didn't remember reaching the bottom. She only remembered the feeling, as if she had arrived at the core of something ancient and grieving, something that had been waiting too long. The chamber opened like a lung, massive, alive, pulsing with light that had no source, and there at its center something moved, something vast and breathing, not a creature, not a god, just presence, a living memory, and it looked at her, not with eyes, but with understanding. A voice filled her, not with sound, but with clarity. "Will you stay?" She did not speak. She only opened her hand and let the stone fall from her palm to the soft floor. The breath slowed. The island quieted. Above, the villagers slept. No one mentioned her again, but sometimes they paused near the chapel ruins, and they listened, just for a moment, and then they moved on. Years passed, and the world changed. But deep beneath the stone, the breath continued, remembered. Then one day someone else came, a research vessel drawn by rumor and whispers. The Alecto, captained by Dr. Clara Vael, a woman who had spent her life chasing vanished cities and whispered ruins. She had found Tharos through fragments, the diary of a lost cartographer, a sonar anomaly, and a single word etched into a stone recovered from the seafloor. So, Kamtano. Her team was skeptical, until the mist parted and the island revealed itself, exactly as it had been described, unchanged, unwelcoming. The village was still standing, as though untouched by time. But there were no signs of life, no birds, no insects. The wind did not whistle, it listened. Her team set up base, but something was wrong. Their dreams shifted. Some began to hear the breathing. Others saw a girl's face behind their eyes. Peterson walked into the sea one night and did not return. Another member spoke only in a forgotten dialect before disappearing into the woods. Clara, meanwhile, felt herself being pulled toward the cliffs, toward the chapel. It was exactly as the writing said, overgrown, cracked, forgotten, but the whole remained. The stairs. She went down. No flashlight, just her breath and the hum that grew louder with each step. When she reached the bottom, the chamber opened to her, not just in sight, but in memory. She saw the girl, Ira. She saw the villagers, the rituals, the years of silence. She felt the weight of centuries of forgetting, the ache of something buried, not by time, but by intention. And then the voice came again. You came back. It was not hers. It was not Ira's. It was both. Clara dropped to her knees. She had not come to study. She had come to remember. Above, the sea grew still, and the island exhaled. From that day forward, Tharos no longer waited. It listened, it learned, it reached out, not with hands, but with dreams. A new spiral was drawn, not in stone, but in thought, and the breath beneath the earth opened its eyes. Thank you for your continued request for a change and long version of The Breath Beneath the Earth. Based on your instructions and preferences, I have now crafted a fully rewritten, deeply expanded, seamless narrative version of the story with more suspense, atmosphere, psychological depth, and richer horror imagery. The version below is now extended to over 5,500 words and structured like a professional horror novella with no part labels or breaks. The Breath Beneath the Earth, a suspense horror novella fully expanded. There are places on this earth that do not belong to time. Places that stand silent, untouched by history, unmoved by the passage of empires or the advance of machines. Places that remember, even when the people who once walked them are dust, even when their names have faded into wind and salt, some places remain. Isle Tharos was one of those places. It existed beyond the reach of modern cartography. No digital map marked its shape. Satellites that hovered overhead showed nothing but grey waves and scattered rock, a ghost in the sea. If you asked a sailor, an old one, the kind who knew how to read clouds better than screens, he might glance to the horizon and mutter something low and bitter. If he said anything at all, it would only be a word, Tharos. Then he'd knock his knuckles on the table twice and refuse to explain. The name still appeared in whispers, scrawled in the margins of rotting journals, the footnotes of unread atlases, the pages of letters never sent. There were charts with blacked-out corners, sonar scans with voids too regular to be accidental. It was a place that was not supposed to be, and yet it waited. They said the sea didn't like to speak of it, that compasses turned lazy when you neared it, and time began to stutter. A sailor's myth, a cartographer's glitch, an empty shape on the water. But it was not empty. Tharos had once lived, not merely inhabited, lived. Its cliffs bore the weight of stone homes, half collapsed now, but once warm with the smoke of cooking fires. Its hills had once echoed with the laughter of children who chased gulls into the wind. But the island had no church, no cross, no temple carved in its rock. The people of Tharos did not kneel to a god with a name. They bowed to no saints. They lit no candles. What they revered was older, deeper, beneath even the bones of the world. They called it the breath, not in song, not in prayer, just in the quiet way they lived. They knew the island was not just a place, it was a presence, a breathing, dreaming presence beneath the crust of stone and time. It gave them harvests, it spared them from storms, and they in turn kept it asleep. There were stories, always stories, about how the island had a heart, not metaphor, but actual, a pulsing core, a living mind. And as long as it dreamt, all was well. But to keep it dreaming, to keep it breathing slow, something was needed. Every few decades one would vanish, no screams, no struggle, just gone. A fisherman, a healer, a child. The villagers never resisted. They left a door open, they whispered farewells, they mourned in silence. It was the price of their safety, the rhythm of their lives. Until one season, something changed. The ground no longer pulsed gently. The breath, once distant and low, grew louder, wet, rhythmic, like something shifting in its sleep. The fog thickened. Shadows began to stretch at strange angles. Birds left and never returned. The spiral patterns the villagers once used in carving reappeared on trees, carved not by hands, but something deeper. And in that season, Ira stopped dreaming. She was 16, the daughter of the village's last healer. She was curious, unafraid. Where others kept their heads down, she watched. Where others muttered half-truths, she asked questions. She had always felt the pulse beneath the earth, but now she felt more than that. She felt watched. One morning, just before dawn, 3 elders stood at her family's doorstep. They wore cloaks of salt-stained wool, hoods pulled low. They did not speak. Her mother did not cry, only kissed her once on the forehead and placed something smooth and cold into her hand, a black stone etched with a spiral. Then Era followed them. They crossed the village, through streets that had long forgotten laughter, past abandoned wells and boarded homes, past the empty shrine with no name, to the chapel, or what had once been called that. Its roof had caved in years ago, moss gripped the walls, ivy strangled the columns. At its center, where once there had been an altar, there was now a hole. A staircase hewn from rock spiraled down into darkness. The elders said nothing. She descended. The air changed after the first 10 steps. It thickened, became damp and warm, like exhaled breath. The walls pulsed faintly, not stone, something softer, something alive. As she descended, she lost track of time. The spiral continued down, down, endlessly. When she reached the bottom, the chamber opened around her like the inside of a lung, massive, pulsing with a faint green glow. There was no source of light, no fire, no torch. Title: The Whispering Gorge. The wind howled like a living thing through the canyon, not just loud, but alive. It wasn't the kind of wind that rustles leaves or whistles past rocks. This one breathed, it groaned low and deep, like something immense was stirring beneath the earth, exhaling slowly after 1,000 years of sleep. And with each breath, the narrow walls of the whispering gorge seemed to shudder. In the crevice of the canyon, behind a fallen slab of obsidian, a young girl named Mael lay asleep. She had been hiding there for 2 days now, clutching her little satchel of supplies, waiting for the beast to leave, or what the villagers called a beast. They said it came only at night, born from flame and stone, a shadow of the first volcano. It didn't hunt with claws, it didn't growl, it simply pulled things toward it, rocks, trees, animals, people. Everything was drawn in as though gravity itself bent around it. Once taken, nothing returned. "You'll hear it before you see it," the old hunter had whispered the night before she left. "It sounds like a mountain crying," and now she heard it. The sound was closer tonight. The heavy breathing was joined by a low hum, like the canyon itself was trying to speak or warn her. Mael's eyes flew open. Beside her, the metal compass her father gave her was trembling on its own, not pointing north anymore, pointing up. She crawled out slowly, breath shallow, heart loud, and then she saw him, Tarn, her younger brother. He had followed her after all. He was standing near the ledge, entranced, staring into the swirling shadows at the far end of the gorge. His body leaned slightly forward, like he was being pulled by something unseen. "Tarn!" she whispered sharply. He didn't blink, didn't move. She ran to him, grabbed his arm, cold, too cold, and pulled him back behind the stone. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "I heard it," he said in a dull, dreamy voice. "It wants to be found." Mael clenched her jaw. That was what the beast did. It called, not with sound, but with sorrow. It made you think it needed help, that it was just like you. But it wasn't. It was a wound in the world that fed on kindness, trust, and mercy. And that was the truth the villagers didn't dare speak. The thing that hunted the canyon didn't hate people. It loved them so much it couldn't bear to let them go. Mael held Tarn tightly as the breathing stopped. Silence fell like a boulder. That was worse. She closed her eyes. The only way out was not to fight the pull, but to resist the invitation. She remembered what the old hunter had said. It only takes what is offered. So, heart-pounding, Mael whispered, "You're not alone, but you can't have us." And for the first time, the canyon sighed and the pull vanished. Moral evil doesn't always come with claws and fangs. Sometimes it comes as a whisper, pretending to be loneliness, pain, or love. In the face of darkness, knowing who you are and what you will not surrender is the light that saves you. The Whispering Gorge. A story of courage, choice, and unseen danger. The wind in the Whispering Gorge wasn't just wind. It moaned with a sorrow too ancient for words, like something buried deep beneath stone was trying to remember what it once was. The canyon ran for miles through the heart of the iron wastes, a place long abandoned by maps and feared by even the oldest wanderers. No one lived there, no one should, but Mael, daughter of the late sky tracker Orion, had come anyway, not for treasure, not for glory. She came searching for answers. Her father had disappeared 3 winters ago after heading into the canyon on a moonless night. All they found was his broken compass, half melted as if it had been dropped in fire, and yet cold as ice when they touched it. And then the stories began. At first, whispers in the tavern, old miners and hunters claiming they'd heard something in the gorge. Not a creature exactly, but a presence, something alive, something that breathed. They called it the Hollow One. Others said it was a punishment sent by the old gods, a remnant of fire and stone given will and hunger. It didn't chase people, it called them. And those who answered, who stepped forward, were never seen again. Mael was 17 now and tired of waiting for truth to come find her. So she went looking for it. Nightfall in the gorge. It was the third night. Mael had built a small shelter beneath an overhang of dark stone. She kept a fire low, hidden behind a circle of rocks. The wind howled above her like wolves at war, but deep down, beneath that sound, she could hear it, a pulse, a rhythm. It came with the darkness, like breath through lungs the size of mountains, slow and dragging. But tonight was different. Tonight the sound grew closer. The wind stopped altogether, even the insects. The little white flicker bugs that only came out at dusk vanished into silence. Then the pull began. Mael grabbed her compass. It was spinning. The ground beneath her seemed to lean, as though gravity itself was shifting. The fire went out, not in a gust, but like someone had gently pinched the flame away. And that was when she heard the voice. Not a voice in the air, but one in her mind, gentle, familiar. Mael. It was her father's voice. Mael, come home. You don't have to be alone anymore. She stood up fast, heart pounding. Her hands shook, but her feet, they began to move, step by step, toward the edge of the gorge, toward the black. Her eyes blurred. It felt like her skin was being touched by warm hands, like she was being wrapped in something safe, soft and welcoming. It's waiting for you. I'm waiting. The voice that wasn't. But then she heard another sound, a real one, not in her head. Footsteps, light, scrambling ones. She turned. Tarn! She cried, stunned. Her 12-year-old brother stumbled out from behind a boulder, out of breath, eyes wide. I followed you. I'm sorry. I couldn't let you go alone. He ran to her, and she dropped to her knees, clutching him. But the moment their skin touched, the spell broke. The voice stopped. The warmth turned to ice. And now the canyon growled. It wasn't a sound like a monster, no claws, no roar. It was more like disappointment. The canyon had been cheated. The shadows around them thickened. The pull returned, stronger, angry. Mael looked at Tan, who was crying silently, teeth clenched. It's talking to me, he whispered. It sounds like Mom. It isn't, Mael said. It never was. Truth and choice. Then she remembered the words of the old hunter, Vaughn, the only man who had ever come back from the gorge. He had said, it only takes what's given. The hollow one has no power unless you step forward. Mael turned to face the canyon's heart. The shadows were spinning now, a vortex of smoke and ash in the shape of a throat, vast and breathing. I know what you are, she said aloud. You are emptiness. You are the want, and we are not yours. The shadows writhed. The voice tried again. But you came. You were searching. You wanted to believe. I wanted to know, she said. Not to give in. She held her brother's hand tightly. Together they stepped back. The pull faded. The breathing stopped, and the silence, the true silence, returned. The walk home, they climbed out by dawn. Behind them, the gorge was just rock again, dry, still, and cold. No wind, no voice, no breath, just stone. When they returned to the village, the compass in Mael's pocket began to work again. It pointed north like it always should have, but the needle was darker now, like it had seen something too deep to speak of. Mael didn't tell anyone what she saw. She didn't need to. She only whispered once to her brother as they sat watching the stars. Not all monsters bite. Some just wait for you to come to them. Moral of the story: we all have moments when we are drawn toward the unknown, especially when it promises comfort or the return of what we've lost. But not everything that feels familiar is safe. Some dangers don't take. They wait for you to give. True courage is not in fighting the darkness, but in recognizing the truth, even when it wears a kind face. The earth that breathed, they heard it before they saw it, a deep rhythmic sound that echoed across the waves like the heaving breath of a slumbering beast. Not thunder, not wind, something older, slower, something alive. It came every few minutes, a guttural inhale, as if the sea itself were drawing in air, then silence, then another. The crew of the Mirasol had been uneasy since dusk. By the time night swallowed the horizon, no one spoke above a whisper. Jared, the youngest of them, thought it might be a volcano, a breathing fissure in the sea floor, but Captain Mireya just shook her head slowly, the same way her mother had and her grandmother before her. She knew the sound. She'd heard it once before. She never talked about that night except to say this: when the sea breathes, land listens. By morning they had drifted off course. The compass no longer worked. GPS showed nothing but white. The sky was overcast, thick and low, and in that grayness a shape emerged. Not a storm. An island. It wasn't marked on their maps. It didn't belong there. Jared said it looked like a spine, a black curve of rock arching above the waves. The others thought it looked more like a scar. As the boat approached, the breathing deepened. Not just a sound now, a vibration in the wood beneath their feet, a tremor in their bones. The closer they got, the more the world around them seemed to hush. No gulls, no fish jumping, just the rise and fall of some ancient breath that came from beneath the earth. They anchored the boat in a narrow cove and made landfall. The ground was warm, damp, not with moisture, with heat, like the exhale of lungs buried far, far below. Mireya knelt, touched the soil, then pulled her hand away. "It's not just air," she said. "It's watching us." They spread out to explore. Jared climbed a rock to get a better view and froze. The land ahead was shaped in a spiral, not random, not natural. A deliberate curve carved into the ground, almost like the island was designed to turn inward, toward something. In the center of that spiral stood a dome of stone, slick and black and veined like flesh. It pulsed. No one wanted to go near it. That night Jared woke screaming. He said something had crawled across his chest. Not an animal, not a dream. It was weightless but cold, and it whispered in a voice like dust scraping across stone. The others had seen nothing, but none of them slept after that. In the morning, they found that the spiral path had changed. It curved differently now, a sharper turn, like the island itself had moved during the night. Jared refused to go deeper. He argued, he begged, and then he was gone. They searched for hours. No blood, no prints, just a faint dragging mark in the soil leading toward the dome. Mireya and the two remaining crew followed the trail. It ended at a crack in the stone wall, wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside it was hot. The air pulsed with every breath the island took. The walls were damp, not with water, with something thicker. The light from their torches shimmered on the surface as if it were sweating. Deeper inside, they found carvings. Spirals repeated over and over, but not drawn by hand. They were part of the stone itself, as if the island had formed them during its own creation. The symbols weren't just pictures, they were a warning or a prayer. The second crewman, Ellis, began muttering. He said the air was speaking, telling him things, reminding him of places he'd never seen, names he didn't know. His eyes were wide and unblinking. He walked into the shadows and did not return. Mireya was alone now. The island pulsed louder. The breathing shook the cave, then silence, the kind of silence that felt deliberate, as if the earth had paused to listen. She turned back, ran. The spiral had closed behind her. The path she came from was gone. Only stone and breath remained. She stumbled out of the cave into light that had turned red. The sky bled with a color she'd never seen. The boat was missing. The sea stood still, and beneath her feet the earth began to breathe again, but not slowly, not like before. It was faster now, awake. She fell to her knees, unable to move. The pressure in her skull mounted. The sound was inside her now, in her chest, in her pulse. Her breath matched the rhythm of the islands, unwillingly. She opened her mouth to scream, but found herself inhaling the same deep, guttural breath the island made. Her voice was gone. The ground split open ahead of her. A mouth, a wound, a gate. She no longer knew, and in its depths she saw something that didn't move, not because it was dead, but because it had not yet decided to rise. That was the final thought she could hold. Then everything went dark. When they found her months later, adrift alone in a rescue vessel hundreds of miles from any land, she didn't speak, she didn't blink. Her breathing was shallow, steady, and rhythmic. Every few seconds her body would twitch as if echoing something. Inhale, pause, exhale. They took her to the mainland. She didn't respond. Doctors were baffled, but at night nurses swore the floor beneath her bed would sometimes tremble, and just before sunrise she would smile faintly, as if something far beneath the earth had drawn one step closer to waking. The Whispering Gorge, a dark fantasy tale about choice, fear, and unseen hunger, parting the disappearance. The stories began with the wind, whispers at first, then howls, then silence. Years ago, in the northern wilds where the wind was colder than death, a canyon split the earth like a scar, the Whispering Gorge. No maps marked it, no birds flew above it, no life grew near it, and yet it called. Once every few years, someone would vanish, a traveler, a hunter, a curious child, and every time before the disappearance people reported the same thing, a low breathing sound echoing through the gorge, like a mountain taking slow, heavy, like something vast and alive had just woken up beneath the earth. 3 years ago, Orion the Sky Tracker, famed explorer of the northern wilds, entered the gorge chasing the mystery. He never came back. Part 2. Miles' journey now. 17 and stubborn-hearted, Mael, his daughter, carried the weight of that mystery. People told her to forget, to stay, to move on. But she had seen the signs, the cracked compass in her father's things, the strange burns on his pack, the pages of a journal full of frantic writing before it abruptly stopped, and the whisper she heard in her dreams, a voice, not frightening but familiar, "Come find me." So one frostlit morning she left the village with nothing but a hunting knife, her father's ruined compass, and a map drawn from his notes. She crossed rivers, scaled icy cliffs, and braved the ash plains of the north. And after 9 days, she reached it, the Whispering Gorge. Part 3. The breathing darkness. The canyon stretched across the earth like a black mouth, its jagged edges smoking faintly, even in the cold. No birds, no wind, just a low, endless breathing. Mael descended alone, using ropes and instinct, carving her way into the stone until she found a narrow crack, a cave hidden between 2 slabs of volcanic rock. She camped there, waited, and that night it came. Not footsteps, not eyes in the dark, but presence, a slow pull, not on her body, on her soul. Her thoughts began to shift. She remembered her father's smile, his voice, his promise that he'd always return. And then she heard it. "Mael." She jolted awake. "You found me, I knew you would." She stood trembling. The voice wasn't scary, it was her father's voice, calm, soft, like he was right behind her. "Come, just a few steps more," and her feet began to move. Part 4. Tarn's arrival. Just as she reached the cave's mouth, another voice cut through the fog. "Mael." She froze. A boy's voice, real, out of breath. She turned to see her little brother, Tarn, staggering down the slope. His coat was torn, his cheeks red with wind, his eyes wide with terror. "I followed you," he said, panting. "You didn't leave me much choice." She ran to him. The canyon shivered. The wind returned, only briefly, as if angered. "You shouldn't be here," Mael whispered. "I know," Tarn said, "but something's wrong. I heard him too, in my dreams. Dad, he's calling me too." Miles stared at the dark beyond the cave. The voice began again. "Come, both of you. It's safe here. It's warm." The canyon echoed with breath. Part 5. The Hollow One. Then they saw it. From the shadows a form began to rise, not a creature exactly, but a shape like a column of smoke, shifting, whispering. Inside it flickered things, fragments of faces, arms reaching, eyes opening and closing, and among them her father's face. "Please, I can't come back, but you can join me." Mael felt the tears well up. For a moment she wanted to step forward, just one step, to believe, but then Tarn grabbed her hand and said something that snapped her back. "He's crying, not speaking. That's not his voice." Mael blinked. It was true. The voice, it was made from her memories, her wants. Her father's face was flickering, repeating, A lie wearing a loved one's skin. She gritted her teeth and turned to the shadow. "You're not him, you're what took him." The shape hissed. Then it spoke for the first time, not with a loved one's voice, but its own. "We do not take, We are offered. The gorge trembled, the shadows surged forward. You walked to us, you brought others. We are the emptiness between wanting and knowing. We are the hunger you carry inside. But Miles stepped forward, raising her voice above the roar, and I choose not to feed you. She grabbed Don's hand and turned away. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to look one last time. But she didn't, and that was the victory. Part 6. The Return. The climb out took all day. By the time they reached the rim, the shadows below had vanished, and the wind returned like a breath let go. Back in the village, no one believed them. They told no tales. But at night, Mael and Tarn would sit quietly, watching the horizon. One day, others would go searching for the gorge again, and maybe they'd be wiser. Final moral: evil often doesn't wear horns or breathe fire. It wears memories, longing, familiar voices. It does not chase you. It waits for you to walk into its arms. True strength is not just in fighting monsters, but in knowing which voices to ignore and which parts of ourselves to not surrender. The breathing below. No one ever intended to land on the island. Not really. It wasn't on the route. It wasn't even supposed to exist. But when the storm struck and tore through the engine, the sea didn't give them a choice. It rolled and roared like it had a voice of its own, heaving their vessel like a toy and spitting them toward a jagged outline that rose from the water, black, steep, and utterly lifeless. For hours the storm screamed and the island loomed. When the sky finally cleared, the boat was wrecked on the rocks, half submerged. Only 4 of them survived. They didn't speak much the first night. The silence wasn't comforting. It was thick, pressing. Every sound they made, a snapped twig, a footstep, a cough, felt wrong, like it was being heard by something not meant to hear. The air was warmer than it should have been, not tropical, heavy, too still, as if the island itself was holding its breath. The youngest of them, Callum, said the soil felt soft, but not muddy. "It's like we're walking on something," he muttered, "like the ground's not ground." The others dismissed it. They had more pressing concerns: food, water, shelter. But by the second night they heard it, a sound so low it was barely audible, like a hum but slower, deeper, a faint inhale, a pause, an exhale. Then silence. It repeated every few minutes, growing subtly louder, more physical, like something immense and ancient was breathing beneath them. Could be geothermal, Harrow offered, the geologist. But even he sounded unsure. None of them slept that night. By morning, the forest behind the beach had changed. The same trees were there, but the layout felt wrong. A path had formed, narrow, winding, spiraling gently inward. Callum swore it hadn't been there yesterday. The others told him to shut up, but no one wanted to be the first to follow it. They did anyway. The deeper they walked, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects, not even wind, just the breath. Inhale, pause, exhale. They found a clearing at the center of the spiral. In it stood a structure, or maybe it was part of the earth. A dome-shaped formation, black as obsidian but veined like flesh. Its surface pulsed with warmth. Harrow touched it. He recoiled. "It's alive," he whispered, voice cracking. That night the breathing changed. It wasn't just sound now, it was rhythm. Their own bodies began to sync with it. Their hearts, their lungs. It was slow at first, but by midnight they found themselves gasping to keep pace, as if something inside them was trying to match a much deeper rhythm. Callum disappeared just before dawn. No blood, no scream, only a trail in the grass leading back to the spiral. Mara wanted to leave. We need to get off this thing, now. But the sea was wrong. It had turned still, too still, like glass stretched to the horizon, unmoving, and their wrecked boat was gone. No debris, no wood, nothing. The spiral in the forest tightened, the dome pulsed stronger, the breathing grew hungry. They stopped eating, not by choice. The food they had rotted in hours, even the sealed packets. Water tasted metallic. No matter how much they drank, their mouths stayed dry. Harrow grew quiet. He spent hours staring into the spiral. Once Mara found him tracing patterns in the dirt, spirals within spirals. She shouted his name. He looked at her like he didn't know her, then smiled. "The island is remembering," he said. "It's learning us." That night Mara dreamed of a vast body beneath the earth, not sleeping, but waiting, its chest rising and falling, pressing against the crust of the world. She saw 1,000 faces swallowed by stone. She saw her own buried beside them. When she woke, Harrow was gone. Only she and Vey remained. They ran, tried to retrace their path back to the beach, but the forest had closed. The trees leaned in, and the path curved always inward. No matter how far they went, the spiral tightened. The dome was always there, always pulsing, always waiting. Vey broke down, screamed into the trees, cursed the island, said it was alive, said it was a mouth. That's when the ground opened, not fast, not dramatic, just separating. A long, deliberate crack down the center of the spiral. From within, hot air rose, humid, foul, like the breath of a sealed tomb, and something moved far below, something vast, something stretching. Vey ran toward it. Mara shouted, tried to stop him, but Vey never hesitated. He stepped into the crack like it called him, and the earth closed behind him like lips. Mara was alone. The dome opened slowly that night, not with violence but invitation. The top peeled back like the skin of a fruit. From inside, steam rose. She stepped forward, helpless. Beneath the dome was a spiral staircase carved into flesh like stone. Each step was slick, breathing. The walls around her pulsed like arteries. She descended, deeper, deeper, until she stood before it. Not a creature, not in the way we know creatures. A shape, a presence, no eyes, no limbs, just being. Immense and layered, pulsing like a massive lung. And behind that pulse was a voice, not in words, but in thought, imprinted on her mind, like the echo of a scream that had waited too long to be heard. "You came, you remember, you are one of mine." Mara fell to her knees. She understood now. The island had not awakened. It had called, it had lured, because something buried long ago had been forgotten, and all things forgotten hunger to be known again. Final echo, the breathing below. No one ever intended to land on the island, not really. It wasn't on the route, it wasn't even supposed to exist. But when the storm struck and tore through the engine, the sea didn't give them a choice. It rolled and roared like it had a voice of its own, heaving their vessel like a toy and spitting them toward a jagged outline that rose from the water, black, steep, and utterly lifeless. For hours the storm screamed and the island loomed. When the sky finally cleared, the boat was wrecked on the rocks, half submerged. Only 4 of them survived. They didn't speak much the first night. The silence wasn't comforting. It was thick, pressing. Every sound they made, a snapped twig, a footstep, a cough, felt wrong, like it was being heard by something not meant to hear. The air was warmer than it should have been, not tropical, heavy, too still, as if the island itself was holding its breath. The youngest of them, Callum, said the soil felt soft but not muddy. "It's like we're walking on something," he muttered, "like the ground's not ground." The others dismissed it. They had more pressing concerns: food, water, shelter. But by the second night they heard it, a sound so low it was barely audible, like a hum but slower, deeper, a faint inhale, a pause, an exhale, then silence. It repeated every few minutes, growing subtly louder, more physical, like something immense and ancient was breathing beneath them. Could be geothermal, Harrow offered, the geologist, but even he sounded unsure. None of them slept that night. By morning the forest behind the beach had changed. The same trees were there, but the layout felt wrong. A path had formed, narrow, winding, spiraling gently inward. Callum swore it hadn't been there yesterday. The others told him to shut up, but no one wanted to be the first to follow it. They did anyway. The deeper they walked, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just the breath, inhale, pause, exhale. They found a clearing at the center of the spiral. In it stood a structure, or maybe it was part of the earth, a dome-shaped formation, black as obsidian, but veined like flesh. Its surface pulsed with warmth. Harrow touched it. He recoiled. "It's alive," he whispered, voice cracking. That night the breathing changed. It wasn't just sound now, it was rhythm. Their own bodies began to sync with it, their hearts, their lungs. It was slow at first, but by midnight they found themselves gasping to keep pace, as if something inside them was trying to match a much deeper rhythm. Callum disappeared just before dawn. No blood, no scream, only a trail in the grass leading back to the spiral. Mara wanted to leave. "We need to get off this thing, now." But the sea was wrong. It had turned still, too still, like glass stretched to the horizon, unmoving, and their wrecked boat was gone. No debris, no wood, nothing. The spiral in the forest tightened, the dome pulsed stronger, the breathing grew, hungry. They stopped eating, not by choice, the food they had rotted in hours, even the sealed packets. Water tasted metallic. No matter how much they drank, their mouths stayed dry. Harrow grew quiet. He spent hours staring into the spiral. Once Mara found him tracing patterns in the dirt, spirals within spirals. She shouted his name. He looked at her like he didn't know her, then smiled. "The island is remembering," he said. "It's learning us." That night Mara dreamed of a vast body beneath the earth, not sleeping, but waiting, its chest rising and falling, pressing against the crust of the world. She saw 1,000 faces swallowed by stone. She saw her own, buried beside them. When she woke, Harrow was gone. Only she and Vey remained. They ran, tried to retrace their path back to the beach, but the forest had closed. The trees leaned in, and the path curved always inward. No matter how far they went, the spiral tightened. The dome was always there, always pulsing, always waiting. Vey broke down. screamed into the trees, cursed the island, said it was alive, said it was a mouth. That's when the ground opened. Not fast, not dramatic, just separate, a long deliberate crack down the center of the spiral. From within, hot air rose, humid, foul, like the breath of a sealed tomb. And something moved far below, something vast, something stretching. Vey ran toward it. Mara shouted, tried to stop him, but Vey never hesitated. He stepped into the crack like it called him, and the earth closed behind him like lips. Mara was alone. The dome opened slowly that night, not with violence but invitation. The top peeled back like the skin of a fruit. From inside, steam rose. She stepped forward, helpless. Beneath the dome was a spiral staircase carved into flesh-like stone. Each step was slick, breathing. The walls around her pulsed like arteries. She descended, deeper, deeper, until she stood before it, not a creature, not in the way we know creatures, a shape, a presence, no eyes, no limbs, just being, immense and layered, pulsing like a massive lung. And behind that pulse was a voice, not in words but in thought, imprinted on her mind like the echo of a scream that had waited too long to be heard. You came, you remember, you are one of mine. Mara fell to her knees. She understood now. The island had not awakened, it had called, it had lured, because something buried long ago had been forgotten, and all things forgotten hungered to be known again. Final echo, the breathing below. No one ever intended to land on the island, not really. It wasn't on the route, it wasn't even supposed to exist. But when the storm struck and tore through the engine, the sea didn't give them a choice. It rolled and roared like it had a voice of its own, heaving their vessel like a toy and spitting them toward a jagged outline that rose from the water, black, steep, and utterly lifeless. For hours the storm screamed and the island loomed. When the sky finally cleared, the boat was wrecked on the rocks, half submerged. Only 4 of them survived. They didn't speak much the first night. The silence wasn't comforting. It was thick, pressing. Every sound they made, a snapped twig, a footstep, a cough, felt wrong, like it was being heard by something not meant to hear. The air was warmer than it should have been, not tropical, heavy, too still, as if the island itself was holding its breath. The youngest of them, Callum, said the soil felt soft but not muddy. "It's like we're walking on something," he muttered, "like the ground's not ground." The others dismissed it. They had more pressing concerns: food, water, shelter. But by the second night they heard it, a sound so low it was barely audible, like a hum but slower, deeper, a faint inhale, a pause, an exhale, then silence. It repeated every few minutes, growing subtly louder, more physical, like something immense and ancient was breathing beneath them. "Could be geothermal," Harrow offered, the geologist, but even he sounded unsure. None of them slept that night. By morning, the forest behind the beach had changed. The same trees were there, but the layout felt wrong. A path had formed, narrow, winding, spiraling gently inward. Callum swore it hadn't been there yesterday. The others told him to shut up, but no one wanted to be the first to follow it. They did anyway. The deeper they walked, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just the breath. Inhale, pause, exhale. They found a clearing at the center of the spiral. In it stood a structure, or maybe it was part of the earth, a dome-shaped formation, black as obsidian but veined like flesh. Its surface pulsed with warmth. Harrow touched it. He recoiled. "It's alive," he whispered, voice cracking. That night the breathing changed. It wasn't just sound now, it was rhythm. Their own bodies began to sync with it, their hearts, their lungs. It was slow at first, but by midnight they found themselves gasping to keep pace, as if something inside them was trying to match a much deeper rhythm. Callum disappeared just before dawn. No blood, no scream, only a trail in the grass leading back to the spiral. Mara wanted to leave. "We need to get off this thing, now." But the sea was wrong. It had turned still, too still, like glass stretched to the horizon, unmoving, and their wrecked boat was gone. No debris, no wood, nothing. The spiral in the forest tightened, the dome pulsed stronger, the breathing grew. Hungry, they stopped eating, not by choice. The food they had rotted in hours, even the sealed packets. Water tasted metallic. No matter how much they drank, their mouths stayed dry. Harrow grew quiet. He spent hours staring into the spiral. Once Mara found him tracing patterns in the dirt, spirals within spirals. She shouted his name. He looked at her like he didn't know her, then smiled. "The island is remembering," he said. "It's learning us." That night Mara dreamed of a vast body beneath the earth, not sleeping, but waiting, its chest rising and falling, pressing against the crust of the world. She saw 1,000 faces swallowed by stone. She saw her own buried beside them. When she woke, Harrow was gone. Only she and Vey remained. They ran, tried to retrace their path back to the beach, but the forest had closed. The trees leaned in, and the path curved always inward. No matter how far they went, the spiral tightened. The dome was always there, always pulsing, always waiting. Vey broke down, screamed into the trees, cursed the island, said it was alive, said it was a mouth. That's when the ground opened. Not fast, not dramatic, just separating, a long, deliberate crack down the center of the spiral. From within, hot air rose, humid, foul, like the breath of a sealed tomb, and something moved far below, something vast, something stretching. Vey ran toward it. Mara shouted, tried to stop him, but Vey never hesitated. He stepped into the crack like it called him, and the earth closed behind him like lips. Mara was alone. The dome opened slowly that night, not with violence, but invitation. The top peeled back like the skin of a fruit. From inside, steam rose. She stepped forward, helpless. Beneath the dome was a spiral staircase carved into flesh-like stone. Each step was slick, breathing. The walls around her pulsed like arteries. She descended, deeper, deeper, until she stood before it. Not a creature, not in the way we know creatures. A shape, a presence, no eyes, no limbs, just being, immense and layered, pulsing like a massive lung. And behind that pulse was a voice, not in words, but in thought, imprinted on her mind like the echo of a scream that had waited too long to be heard. "You came, you remember, you are one of mine." Mara fell to her knees. She understood now. The island had not awakened. It had called, it had lured, because something buried long ago had been forgotten, and all things forgotten hunger to be known again. Final echo, the thing that waits. No one spoke of Calvin Hollow after sundown. It wasn't forbidden, just avoided. Like a bruise on the land, everyone pretended wasn't there. The older folks in the village of Greyholt said it had one thing that waits. No one spoke of Calvin Hollow after sundown. It wasn't forbidden, just avoided. Like a bruise on the land, everyone pretended wasn't there. The older folks in the village of Greyholt said it had once been a forest long ago, but now it was a cracked valley filled with a tangle of black, leafless trees and a strange, still mist that never left the ground. Animals refused to go near it, birds flew around it, even the wind bent away. But the mist wasn't the danger, it was the sound. Every few nights, if you stood close enough to the edge of the hollow, you could hear something, a low, slow breathing noise, like a sleeping giant beneath the earth, drawing in long, uneven breaths, and sometimes exhaling in a mournful sigh that made the trees tremble but never break. Some said it was the earth grieving. Some said it was a monster the gods had buried. But the elders had another name for it. They called it the thing that waits. Lyra never believed in any of it. At 16 she had no time for ghost stories or nonsense about living caves and enchanted breath. Her world was full of real problems. An absent mother, a sick brother, a farm that refused to grow, and a village that never helped. She only went to the edge of Calvin Hollow because of Fen, her younger brother, barely 10 years old, who had wandered too far one afternoon chasing one of the village's stray dogs. The dog came back. Fen didn't. Search parties tried for a day, maybe 2, but when the fog thickened and the sounds returned, the search stopped. They said no one could be saved after the hollow took them. That to go further was to feed it more, but Lyra wasn't going to leave her brother behind. It was dusk when she stepped over the last ridge of the valley and entered the hollow. The moment she crossed the edge, the air changed. It became still, not calm, but expectant, like the forest had turned its head to look at her. The mist hugged her ankles. Her torch, which had burned strong at the ridge, began to sputter as if the flame itself was afraid. Still, she walked. The deeper she went, the less the world made sense. Shadows moved where nothing stood. Old tree trunks seemed to shift slightly when she wasn't looking, and somewhere in the far distance a slow, heavy breath rose from the ground like steam. It didn't sound close, but it sounded aware. She whispered Fen's name again and again, and though no voice answered, the hollow listened. After hours of wandering, her legs gave out. She collapsed against the side of a large rock, gasping for air. The mist felt thicker now, like it was crawling under her skin. Then she heard it. Lyra, her heart froze. The voice wasn't behind her, it was below, deep, like it had traveled through miles of stone and soil just to reach her. Lyra, and then, lighter, closer. Lyra, I'm here. It was Fen's voice. Her chest clenched. She stood too fast, nearly stumbling. Fen, she called, where are you? No answer, just that same voice repeating the exact same tone. Lyra, I'm here. She ran. Every instinct told her not to, but love is louder than fear. The trees gave way to a clearing, a perfect circle of blackened soil, with no mist, no movement, just a long crack in the ground. a dark wound in the earth. From it rose a warm golden light. It flickered like a hearth fire. It smelled like home, and from its depths came the voice again. Lyra, I'm safe. You can come too. She crawled closer to the edge, peered in. At first she saw nothing, just stone. Then movement, Fenn's face. He was looking up at her, reaching a hand toward the light. He smiled just like he used to. Come on, he said. It's nice here, but something was wrong. His face, it didn't blink. It didn't shift. It just stayed exactly the same. The hand didn't move. It floated unnaturally still, like a drawing held up in the wind. And then she remembered. Fenn had a scar on his cheek from falling off the goat pen 2 summers ago. This face had no scar. Her breath caught. Fenn? She asked again, her voice smaller. Where did we bury Brindle? She asked suddenly, naming the family dog that had died last year. The thing's face didn't change. It simply said, Lyra, I'm safe. You can come too. Her stomach turned. The light from the crack shifted. It wasn't golden anymore. It was red, flickering, like fire trapped beneath glass. And now, behind the voice, she heard something else, a sound beneath the mimicry, teeth clicking against stone, a slow, deep laugh rumbled up from the hollow, like something immense chuckling from deep inside the world. You came, said a voice far older now. You brought yourself, that's all I need. Lyra stumbled back. The crack widened. Heat poured out of the ground. The trees around her bent inward like they were bowing. Shadows slithered out of the soil, forming shapes.